Hundreds of miles off the coast, deep underwater, people across the planet are doing something incredible that makes our whole world go round. Now, for most of us, we go about our daily lives, we're blissfully unaware that this is happening at all. The fact is, without a small group of people willing to subject themselves to some of the harshest conditions on the planet, without seeing their families or even the sun for weeks at a time and confined in a cramped metal box that would kill you instantly if it broke, we might not enjoy many of the luxuries in modern society that we take for granted. So as a thank you, we're going to tell you all about them. Welcome to the most dangerous industry in the world, where the only things higher than the pay and the pressure are the risks of death. Saturation diving. So what exactly is saturation diving, and why do we need it in our modern world? Saturation diving involves individuals traveling deep under the sea to complete major construction and infrastructure projects. These divers descend up to 300 meters below the waves into a pitch-black, freezing cold ocean for weeks at a time in order to work. The reason we need them is simple. They help power almost everything. And that's not an exaggeration. Saturation divers are responsible for maintaining and constructing offshore oil infrastructure such as wells, rigs, pipelines, as just one of their many roles. Whether they are flipping flow valves, capping wells, tightening bolts, or repairing blowout preventers, without them, the oil sector that the entire world relies on would start to fall apart. And it's not just the energy industries they support. Salvage operations for ships, cargo, or sunken rigs on the ocean floor often require saturation divers due to the lengthy recovery process. Some work with the defense sector, rescuing submarines, conducting covert operations, or even performing demolition work. Others engage in scientific research, mapping underwater geology or studying deep-sea ecosystems. Still others focus on pure construction, building underwater tunnels, laying fiber optic cables, and repairing power lines. In short, if you used a car, the internet, or electricity today, you have saturation divers to thank. They keep the show on the road for all of us. But how does saturation diving actually work? How is it possible for someone to withstand bottom of the ocean pressures for an entire month? Well, actually, it's pretty ingenious. Now, divers begin their journey the moment they step off of land onto a flat-bottom ship known as a dive support vessel, or DSV. Every piece of equipment and every person on a DSV is there specifically to support the work and lives of the divers. There are subsea managers, dive supervisors, life support supervisors, technicians, assistants, chefs, and more. They control what the divers breathe and eat. They supply personal necessities, help keep everyone safe during dives, and even assist remotely with the flushing of the toilet. Once inside the DSV, between 6 and 12 divers enter what is known as a saturation chamber. The hatch is sealed behind them, and for the next month, the divers will know nothing but the chamber, a diving bell, and their work on the seafloor. This is why it's called saturation diving. To ensure that the divers' bodies can handle the immense pressures at depth, gases are slowly pumped into the chamber over several hours to mimic the conditions at the bottom of the sea. The goal is to make the divers' bodies saturated with these gases, allowing them to move between the chamber and extreme underwater depths almost as easily as riding an elevator, just a bit wetter. Although saturation diving only became a true industry in the 1970s, experiments date back to the 1930s, which proved that after a certain amount of time and gas exposure, a person could survive at depth indefinitely with the right life support equipment. The gas mix used is often a blend of oxygen and helium because surface-level air contains too much oxygen and nitrogen for safe use at depth. At extreme depths, nitrogen can cause what's known as nitrogen narcosis, a condition that mimics being drunk and can even lead to unconsciousness, which is not ideal when you're 300 meters underwater and holding a blowtorch. Meanwhile, oxygen becomes toxic at high pressures, and too much of it can literally kill you. Helium, a harmless and inert gas, is used instead to keep the mix safe and effective. Now today, most saturation systems use a DSV so that divers remain on the surface while still under pressure. However, in the past, some systems required people to live completely underwater in a chamber for a month at a time, with gases being pumped down into it. In 1964, naval aquanauts occupied the first Sea Lab, a metal-encased living quarters lowered to a depth of 65 meters. This setup meant that divers had to spend a significant amount of time cramped inside a diving bell, which was slowly raised to the surface to allow the gases in their bodies to decompress each time they surfaced. After spending a month in a metal box underwater, the last thing anyone would want is an extended stay in an even smaller one. Modern systems, however, allow for pressurization of the surface. This means that a bell can simply take the divers up and down at will. It's better for the divers, safer, and more efficient for work. The trade-off is that even when on the surface, divers cannot leave the chamber. A saturation chamber usually contains both a living area and a bathroom, but since it's completely sealed, the divers are entirely reliant on the DSV for everything. And it's hardly the Ritz. Beds are shunted together in claustrophobic arrangements, with the average diver lying inside a chamber with between 5 and 11 other people for a month at a time, where space comes at a premium. A diving bell, which is connected to the chamber and also pressurized, is usually even more cramped than the chamber itself. This bell is then transported down to the sea floor. The diving bell isn't just a metal container. It's packed with gauges, switches, communication equipment, and loops of hoses referred to as umbilicals that carry gas, electricity, voice communications, hot water, and video feeds between the diver's helmets and the ship. Lowered via a cable attached to the DSV, it's common for one diver to remain in the bell to monitor vital systems such as communications, breathing, and hot water, while one or two others, all suited up in specialized diving gear, exit the bell for about 6 hours to carry out their work for the day. Divers don't need to take anything other than their suits to the bottom. Everything else they require is sent down via a cable from the ship. This arrangement allows for a little extra space inside the bell. The items sent down are mostly tools: saws, torches, wrenches, welding equipment, collection bags, and anything else needed for the job at hand, often involving back-breaking labor in the most hostile conditions possible. After 6 hours, once the work is done, and hopefully everyone has survived, everyone climbs back into the bell, which is then winched up to the surface. The divers return to the chamber to spend the rest of their time resting, eating, and participating in safety drills before the next shift. Because these operations are quite expensive, it's common to have multiple dive teams rotating in and out to work on jobs continuously. But that's just the job itself. What is the life of a saturation diver actually like in the chamber and on the ocean floor? Well, it ain't a stroll in the park. Given what we've told you so far, you'd be right to assume that work for a saturation diver doesn't seem exactly joyful, yet there must be something convincing people to sign up for this gig. I mean, there's certainly an element of camaraderie that divers share among their fellow subsea brethren, and the work is both highly important and fulfilling, but really, the pay is excellent. Most divers do not work year-round, yet comfortably make six-figure salaries. And honestly, for the work they do, still probably not enough. However, it's also a hard field to get into. The courses to become a diver are usually granted only to those with significant diving experience, and they are highly expensive. It's relatively common for former police or Navy divers to transition into saturation diving for this reason. Even then, many cannot find work without being vouched for because the stakes are so high when working in such a dangerous environment. So for all that effort, money, and time, what's life actually like for them? Well, it depends on the company and the specific job, but a common working pattern is 28 days on, 28 days off. Crews are predominantly male, although some women have also undertaken the job. Living in a pressurized container with up to a dozen strangers means that you have to be a people person. At the very least, you must not be difficult to be around, as tension is the last thing anyone needs when you're required to trust each other at extreme depths and you're all confined in a metal box for a month. The job provides plenty of pressure already, so it takes a certain kind of person not to add any more. Communication is paramount to safety. And because helium is part of the gas mix, divers spend the entire time sounding like Alvin and the Chipmunks on a construction site. To communicate with the surface, some voice unscrambling technology can be used, but it's notoriously unreliable. As a result, many dive supervisors choose simply not to use it at all. Outside communication is also very limited. Email appears to be the most common way for divers to keep in touch with their families. However, with limited internet connectivity in such remote offshore locations, that's about it. Satellite phones allow for calls to be made to the divers' families, but these are also restricted, although some divers do have access to basic text messaging systems. With internet access, reminiscent of your grandma's house during the 90s, entertainment options are pretty limited. Books, magazines, board games are common, and sometimes divers have preloaded music, TV shows, or movies onto their devices before their assignment. Otherwise, you'd better get chatting with your fellow divers to stave off boredom between drills and work. The DSV also strives to keep spirits up by providing food, amenities, and everything else the divers need while in the chamber via an airlock. As far as food goes, there's even a menu. Due to the strenuous nature of the work, some divers might consume up to 6,000 calories a day in the chamber. Although food remains largely unaffected by pressure, your taste buds become somewhat muted, much like having COVID or something, so flavorful food and condiments are a must. Divers must also take a healthy number of multivitamins, including vitamin D. Working in a pressurized container with minimal sunlight hundreds of meters below the surface means divers rarely get any exposure to natural light. Even using the bathroom can be a challenging endeavor that requires assistance from the DSV. Special systems are set up to handle the pressure change and ensure waste is disposed of safely, with flushing controlled externally. When working on the ocean floor, it's pitch black with nearly zero visibility. Communicating with fellow divers as well as with the surface is vital for getting the job done, so maintaining a high level of concentration is crucial under the waves. Life support systems integrated into the diving suits and helmets, including systems that circulate hot water to keep the divers warm and supply air to their helmets, ensure that they can work under these extreme conditions. Once work is complete and the shift is up, it takes time to slowly decompress the saturation chamber. Generally speaking, the rule is 24 hours of decompression for every 30 meters of pressure. This means that even after the work is done, some divers have to spend over a week inside the saturation chamber before they can see their families. Many divers say that these final decompression days are the hardest part of the job because all they want to do is go home. The physical toll of diving is significant, causing headaches, joint pain, and shortness of breath, as the human body simply isn't designed to function at the extreme depths to which divers are regularly subjected. When they finally emerge, bleary-eyed into the sunlight, they're pale, exhausted, in pain, with their body clocks thrown off, and miserable, but they're relieved to be back on the surface. There's also a heavy mental toll. The job can be mentally isolating, since once sealed inside the chamber, you rarely see anyone other than your fellow divers. It is mentally taxing to constantly contend with the knowledge that at any moment a sudden unforeseen problem, or even a mistake you didn't make, could end your life. Even with dynamic positioning systems that compensate for wind and swells, bad weather can suspend work, forcing divers to remain inside the chamber for days on end without going into the water, all the while having no clue where they are. When confined like that, even the chance to stretch your legs on the seafloor might seem like a blessing. It clearly takes a lot of resilience to do this job. One diver noted in an interview that for every 20 people who graduate from the training to become a saturation diver, only one is still doing it after 5 years. Some leave because it's difficult to be away from home for extended periods. Others simply realize it's not for them. And unfortunately, a few are forced to stop after succumbing to the immense dangers that are ever present under the sea. But what dangers are there? What makes saturation diving one of the most perilous jobs a human could possibly undertake? So far, we've alluded to the fact that saturation diving is incredibly dangerous. It's why divers are paid so highly, why so few people do it long term, and why it takes a certain kind of person to do it. But what are the divers actively watching out for on a day-to-day basis? First, consider some numbers to hit the point home. A 1998 CDC prevention report estimated that the occupational fatality rate in the US for all commercial divers is 40 times higher than in other professions. For most people, their drive to work is the most dangerous part of their day. For saturation divers, that journey might be the safest part. Another report from the University of Cambridge noted that between 2011 and 2017, there were 460 non-fatal injuries in commercial diving. On average, 1 injury every 4 to 5 days in one of the most safety-intensive and highly experienced sectors on the planet. A journalist and former saturation diver, Ray Sinclair, shared some pretty damning numbers in a 2019 blog post. According to him, 90% of saturation divers encounter life-threatening situations at work, almost a guarantee. Of those who survive, many suffer from decompression sickness, pulmonary diseases, COPD, and cancer. 30% have been diagnosed with brain injuries following accidents. 96% reported that their accidents significantly reduced their quality of life, and sadly, 23 people had committed suicide at the time of writing. Even if you are the most qualified person in the world, saturation diving is something of a lottery. It's absolutely no joke. Under that kind of pressure, even a minor issue, like an infection, could cause serious harm. Divers are medically screened before entering the chamber to root out infections because clogged sinuses or ears can trap air that wreaks havoc at depth, potentially resulting in permanent damage. Getting sick is the last thing you want to risk when you're confined with several other people in a metal tube for a month. The infection rate is generally higher in these environments due to the extra humidity, and pathogens can be introduced through the seawater or even the freshwater supply. It is a constant battle when down at the bottom of the ocean. The list of hazards is long and varies with the job. The University of Cambridge report noted that a large percentage of victims were crushed by heavy equipment or infrastructure. Working with huge oil pipes that stretch for kilometers or tasked with dismantling heavy rigs poses a major danger, especially in near pitch-black conditions where visibility is minimal. One American diver, Shannon Hovey, highlighted a major risk that many might not consider: getting buried alive. When deconstructing or salvaging sunken infrastructure, materials often become partially buried in thick mud. If disturbed, this mud can suddenly shift, burying a diver. Quoting Hovey, "Say an old diesel engine that's halfway up your ditch wall finally starts working its way out. Everything kinda moves slow, so you'll notice a little mud going past your leg, and then all of a sudden, there's this huge bunch of pressure on your lower back, and then it's on your upper back, and it's starting to push you over, and unless you climb onto the top of it, you'll definitely get buried." Look, being buried alive on the surface is frightening enough. Underwater, that concept just seems 1,000 times worse, doesn't it? Other job-specific hazards include exposure to oil and gas. When working on pipelines, leaking hydrocarbon gases can collect around you, forming an unseen bubble in the murky conditions. And when you're working with welding torches, it's easy to see how that could end disastrously. Some dangers are far more basic, yet equally perilous. The repetitive nature of the work means that fatigue or complacency can set in over time, leading to mistakes that put lives at risk. Ray Sinclair recalls in his 2019 boast an incident where something as simple as not activating the chemical lights on a heavy crane hook meant it barely missed him by centimeters as it was lowered at high speed. Even simply panicking can be fatal. A common problem among saturation divers is known as breathing past your hat. Hard labor can cause you to breathe faster than the life support systems can replenish, recycling carbon dioxide in your helmet. This can trigger panic, leading you to breathe even faster, a dangerous cycle that can quickly become hazardous. The only solution is to consciously slow down your breathing until the gases entering your helmet can catch up. But perhaps the most dangerous injury that can lead to death during saturation diving occurs during the decompression process as you near the surface. On the minor end, divers can suffer from decompression sickness if the chamber is equalized too quickly, a condition that can be fatal under the wrong circumstances. Eardrums can burst, lung alveoli can hemorrhage, defective dental work that traps gas can cause explosions in your mouth, you might collapse a lung, or a gas bubble could enter your bloodstream and cause an embolism, which, if it reaches your brain, can cause catastrophic damage. And that's just a handful of the issues that can arise from even minor mishaps. On the major end is a truly horrifying scenario. The difference in pressures is so extreme that if it's suddenly equalized all at once, explosive decompression can occur. If seals are not tightened properly, bolts are not fastened correctly, or if a portal blows out due to poor maintenance, the pressure can instantly drop from as high as 9 atmospheres to 1, leading to gruesome, catastrophic results. In 1983, one instance of explosive decompression, the Byford Dolphin incident, became a gory cautionary tale to ensure that safety warnings are heeded. On November 5, 1983, an experienced member of the surface crew on the Byford Dolphin semi-submersible oil rig, William Crammond, was in the middle of a routine procedure. He'd just connected the diving bell to 2 pressurized living chambers, each holding 2 divers, when suddenly the diving bell detached from the chambers before the doors were properly closed, and in an instant, all hell broke loose. The diving bell, weighing several tons, was launched away at high speeds, killing Crammond and seriously injuring another assistant. However, the divers inside the chambers suffered the worst fate. 3 of them, Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, and Bjorn Glaver Bergerson, were essentially boiled alive as the nitrogen gas bubbles in their blood violently erupted into a sickening foam, causing them to die instantly. The 4th diver, Truls Hellevik, experienced the highest pressure differential as he stood near an inner door. His body was sucked out through a gap so small that he was violently dismembered and his organs were ejected onto the deck. This harrowing incident serves as a reminder that even when every precaution is taken in saturation diving, things can still go wrong and lives can be lost. Modern saturation systems now incorporate locking mechanisms that, in theory, prevent such disasters. At least, the 5 men who died that day didn't lose their lives in vain. As Ray Sinclair puts it, if you think safety is expensive, compare it to the cost of an accident. And that's probably for the best. Given how unimaginably perilous saturation diving is, you might be tempted to ask, couldn't machines do this? So is saturation diving set to become another profession automated out of existence? And the answer's Kind of yes, but also no. Machines could likely perform some of the most basic tasks that saturation divers handle, but robots lack the fine motor skills and crucial decision-making abilities that human divers possess. It's not as though this possibility hasn't been explored either. During the Deepwater Horizon disaster, when humans couldn't reach the bottom of an oil well actively spewing oil into the sea, a robot was sent down to try and activate its faulty blowout protector, but it failed. So for now, divers remain essential. In fact, they may soon be needed more than ever for new kinds of jobs. As we continue to scour the Earth for resources, rare metals are being discovered on the ocean floor that will need to be mined for advanced computer chips and other technologies. Divers will likely be involved in that process, just as they are with oil and gas production today. We're also going to build more tunnels, lay more cables, and repair both, or when they need maintenance, meaning divers will be needed for those projects as well. But that's not all. Soon, underwater data centers could be utilized worldwide once the technology moves beyond the testing phase. Divers will be needed to install these centers, support their infrastructure, and perhaps even repair them. It seems that no matter how dangerous it is, saturation diving is not going to be going away anytime soon. It's simply too useful. Overall, saturation diving represents the best of humanity. The bravery, intelligence, resilience, and skill of the divers exemplify the highest achievements that our species has to offer. It illustrates the incredible technological innovation that allows us to shape the planet in our image, even its hidden parts. Accessing the sheer depths and defying Mother Nature by merely existing there has required remarkable advancements in technology and ingenuity that we should be proud of. Yet it also represents the worst of us. It underscores the danger and isolation we impose on everyday people in exchange for high pay, all to extract as much as we can from the planet. It reveals the immense injury and destruction that operating in these environments can entail, even with our so-called advancements in safety. Above all, it highlights that even our smallest, most human mistakes can have devastating, fatal consequences. It might just be the most human job in the world. Thank you for watching.